All right, so how many of the teams already set up the EC2 account? All right, sounds good. All right, if you haven't done that, do that as soon as you can. Now you can use Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, or some other cloud providers. Okay, but then no matter what you use, you need to find one place to host it. This is very important because right now everything is local, and then we don't want you to just do local stuff. Because a very big advantage is that if you deploy that in the cloud with a real domain name, and then it's very easy for you to present it on your resume. You can say, this is your 4-year project, you did a web service, you use this tool, and here is the link. I deployed that using AWS, and here's the domain name. You put that on a resume, and when people are looking at a resume, they can simply click on it, and they will see, oh, actually, you have done this kind of whole full stack development plus all the deployment stuff. All right, so it's a very good way to enrich your resume. So that's why it's really worth your time to do the AWS. And also later on, we'll talk about buying a domain name. All right, so this, I hope everyone, every team also really take it seriously because this is the part where you can differentiate yourself. Okay, if we just do some of the assignment, if we just do some exams, that's really useless for your resume. All right, so very quick recap, okay? We showed you how you create a server inside AWS. So AWS is a cloud computing provider. They give you over 100 different services. The EC2 is their most important service because they provide all the service. A lot of other services depends on the service. Last time, some of you asked me, what if I want to deploy a database? Whether it's Mongodb or MySQL or some other databases, right? Obviously, you can always run that database on that specific machine. If you want to save money, just run it in the same host. So the database and their applications stay together. So one host is fine, it's for free for 1 year. Or you can split them. That's probably better in terms of architecture. But if you don't want to pay, what you can do is you can have another teammate to create another AWS account and then use that one as a free tier and to hold that database separately. And then I also look at that in AWS, they also have a service for database. So if you go scroll down here, there's a database service. All right, so RDS is their earliest service that you can use for this kind of purpose. So if you're particularly using a relational database such as MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server, or if you use Oracle, that's very rarely we use because it's very expensive, and you can try to use this service. So the RDS is a service that automatically hosts all the database for you. So you can create a database, and then you can simply choose what kind of database you want. All right. Amazon Aurora, that is Amazon's own, like a MySQL type of database. They create their own. But if you want a MySQL, this is the choice. Oracle is more commercial. PostgreSQL, some of you probably also use that, very popular also, open source, developed by Berkeley. Now this is Microsoft's SQL Server. So these are all the traditional relational database you can think about to use. And then the really good thing about using RDS is you just configure this and then eventually you click on create, that's it. And they're gonna host everything. You will have an endpoint to use with all the credentials and logins. You don't need to worry about how to configure all of this extra stuff. All right, so, and also this server is separated. And looks like you also have a free tier for here to use it for 1 year. So that's also good enough. All right, but this only applies to relational database. If you need a non-relational, you'll probably have to host it yourself. Even though AWS also has their own solution, but it's not really MongoDB. They have a DynamoDB, all right? And then that is their NoSQL database. They also have a lot of others. A QLDB, I actually haven't seen this. This is a document DB. What is this? Interesting. I haven't really looked at this. They are just creating things really quickly. Okay, every day. Let's see, this is document DB. Oh yeah, so this is the MongoDB compatibility. So that's good to know. All right, not surprising because MongoDB is definitely getting very popular. So that's basically their own version, so they can host it for you. So just think about this. All right. So that's coming back to the database, and then let me go back to EC2. All right, so let's actually show you how we can actually deploy our software to this server. And then last time I already showed you, this is the one I created, T2 Micro. And once you set it up, and this is the region, we're using Northern California, it's closer. And then you can find a lot of information right here, all right? Another very important step I showed you last time was when you are creating the server, the last step, they will ask you to create your key pair, the private key. And then you will need to download that file, right? So if you download the file, remember, let me find it somewhere here. It's called CS4800 fall.pem file, and this is the private key file. Okay, make sure you have this one. Otherwise, you can't log in. All right. So now once the server is up and running, and which took only like 20 seconds, what we need to do now is to run our web service in that cloud machine. And the last time I also highlighted the fact that you need to make sure that everything runs well without issues, and then you have to test it locally. You also want to test building the jar to run it. Okay, so let me go to demo right here. So Maven package. All right, so that's going to run everything, including your tests, and then you eventually generate a jar file, and then you go to the folder called target, and then you do java -jar CS4800, and then you run it. All right, so here is how we run it in the terminal. So again, I'm still running this on my local computer with Java, with the jar file and everything. And what we need to do is to do exactly the same thing, but in the target machine. All right. So in order to do that, well, we need to know how do we get to that machine, right? So this machine is hosted in Amazon in Northern California. Okay, I don't know exactly where that is, and probably near Bay Area. Okay, obviously you're not gonna go to that location to open our computer and then use a keyboard there to do it, right? So everything is done remotely. And then to remotely access this server, and you mainly use this tool called SSH, right? So there's some tutorial I'll point out for you to show you how you do everything. But normally when you try to connect to this machine, especially if this is a Linux-based system, then you use SSH command to connect to it. This is very easy if you use Mac or Linux, but if you Windows, then you will need a equivalent tool called PuTTY. And that does the same thing. It's just a little graphical UI that you can use. All right, so let me show you how we can connect to this machine. To connect to this machine, you need to know a couple of things. Number one, you need to know the IP address or the domain name. They're the same thing. Normally, we use the domain name just right here. This is actually the unique domain name for this particular server. All right. So when we're trying to connect to this machine, now we need to run this command called SSH. All right. So let me do this. So later on, we'll summarize some of the command you probably need very often. So the command I'm talking about is called SSH, right? So this is the command that can build a secure terminal between two computers. And then it's a live terminal that you can send command, send information over and exchange information. But everything is encrypted. All right, so it's very secure. That's why when you use this command, you need to know the key, the password, and everything, right? So to connect it, you will need to do a few things. You do SSH, all right? First of all, you need to provide your password, okay? In this case, EC2 asks you to provide a password using the private key. So you need to locate where that key is. And I just showed you that key is in my download folder. So I'm gonna go to my download folder. And then the key is called CS4800 fall.pem file, right? So the -I parameter is the place where you put your private key file. Okay, so this is just like your input or password. Some of the machines ask you to just type the password, but EC2 requires you to use the private key. All right, so with the password here, and then I can do the login user. So when you try to log into that machine, most of the system today are multi-user system. So you need to specify the username, just like when you open your Mac or Windows and then the starting screen that also need to log in. So the username is something called EC2-user. All right, so you can find this information. Go back. I think you can find this information somewhere. Depending on the Linux you use, if you right click here, there is a connect option. The connect option is going to show you the username. Okay, so this is the one, the EC2-user. If you use Ubuntu, it's maybe the username will be Ubuntu. If you use some other system, the username will be root, maybe. Of course, you can create other usernames once you log in and then do all those setup. All right, so go back here, EC2-user, and then I do @ and then the last part will be the address of the machine. So the address, you can either use IP address or you could use, this domain name. So it's this one right here. So I normally just use this one. So to do this one here. Okay, so this is the command to remotely connect to your EC2 server or any kind of remote Linux. Okay, so one more time, password, username, and host. That's it. All right, so I hit enter, and they ask you if you want to connect. I press yes. All right, and something when you look at it here, when I try to connect, is there some warning and some errors happens. So permission here for this file are too open. It requires that the private key are not accessible by any others. So bad permission, permission denied, everything. Okay, so I just leave this message right here just for you to be aware. If you see something like this, read this message. Sometimes it will tell you some hints. So what they're saying is, okay, so they saw that you're using this password key file and try to log in, but they found out that this specific file on my computer are too open, right? And they feel that this file, if it's too open, that everyone can read and write and modify it, it's not very safe. So they're not going to trust this key file. So in order to use this one, you must make your private key file not accessible by others. All right, so a little bit in background on this one, in any kind of a system, you could configure some of the permissions. For example, I don't know for Mac, you can do it. For Windows, for sure, you can do like read only. You can allow different people to do different things. I guess in Mac, you can also do something similar. Do we have any permissions right here? Oh, here, permissions. As you can see, this file, the current user can do read and write both, but others you can only do read. So this is the kind of permission I'm talking about, right? So of course, in Windows and Mac, you can have this kind of UI to do it, but in Linux, it's better to do is you can see that particular file. For example, if I find out this file, CS4800. Okay, so this is the file, and then if I list that one with some more parameter, and it will show you some more stuff. So right here, you can see, it's talking about the same thing. For the user itself, you can read and write, others you can only write. Okay. However, they want you to be making this file only like a readable. Okay, definitely not writing anything else. Okay, so in order to change it, let me see. They normally provide a command for you to do it if you don't know it. But let me see if they still have it. All right, so let me see. Connect. Yeah, so this one here, guys. So there's some kind of instructions on how you do it. You open access client, get a key, make sure the key is not publicly viewable. So you do this command, the chmod, that's how you change permission. Okay, so I'm not gonna go too much detail, but let me run this command. If I do chmod 400, and then I specify this file again. All right, I'm gonna change the permission. So now if I try to list this file, I want you to compare this is the permission before, and then this is the permission right now. So obviously right now, you can only read it as the owner of the file. That's it. Nobody else, not even be able to read it. So that's how you can keep this file like a little bit more secure. Okay, so once you got this one, now we can come back to that command. Okay, so I'll do this one more time. SSH -i password file, and we got CS4800, and then from there we'll do ec2-user at that server name. Okay, right here. As you can see, they gave you this kind of an example, just like what I'm using here. All right, so do this one, hit enter, and now you're successful getting into that machine. As you can see, previously the problem was my own MacBook. Right now it's ec2-user at this specific IP. So this one now is not my machine. Okay, this is from Amazon data center. It's a remote machine. All right, so this is how you verify your server is up and running, and then make sure you can log in. All right, so any questions so far? In Windows, I think you will need to use this tool called put it, right? So some kind of should be some documentation about this one. It's the same thing. It's just some UI based. That's why when you are developing some server stuff, Linux stuff, you know, the Windows is not as convenient as others. Yeah, this is a nice tool, but you know, it's because it's a graphical UI. Sometimes I find it's just much more work to do. You'd rather, if you know the command very well, it's definitely much more efficient. All right. Okay, so now we got a file. We got to the server. All right, so let's keep going. Now the goal is that we want to run our file, the jar file right here. But now this is in a different machine. I don't have all the jar file everything, right? So in order to get it, there are two approaches you can think about. Number one, you can actually check out the code from GitHub to here, and then just run everything and build it here. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. You do git clone and get the file, everything, and do Maven package, and then that's how you can generate the file. But in reality, we don't do that. The main reason is because the whole build process takes a lot of time. And then if you already build it, then there's no need to build this again in this every single machine. Also, this is only true kind of run it in one machine, one server. In the future, you might have a lot of servers running the same thing. And then if you have to check out the code and then run the build, every single machine, that's not really efficient. Also, we don't want to expose all the source code on the server, target server, and that's also not necessary, right? So a better way is what if I just copy the file over, right? So let me go back here. This is my server. This is my local. Now, if I go to my folder here, as I showed you, this target folder already has the file, this one here. This is the one we generated with Maven package. All right, so to prove that, make sure that you look at the size of the file. All right here, this size is 17 megabytes. So that has everything. As long as you have the jar file, you can run it. So when we're deploying, that's why we mentioned last time, you want to make sure you got a very easy to deliver type of format for your files. It's one single SVU file, that's always preferred. Okay, so if we have this one, all we need to do is copy this one over to this machine. That's it. All right, so that's the preferred way to go. And then the question is, how do we copy the file from one machine to another? All right, there are commands to do it. Now, for those of you who know how to do the copy in command line, right? So in Linux or Mac, you do something called CP copy. For example, I want to copy this thing here to my desktop. I go to my desktop, I hit enter, and I go to the desktop, right? So if I go to the desktop, let me just show you here. All right. Okay, so I got too many stuff here. Okay, so where did I copy this? So it's too many things. Desktop. Or maybe let's go to the beginning. Yeah, right here. So I right here, right? So that I was just trying to show you how the command line works. Gosh, I need to clean my desktop. All right, so that's the CP command. In Windows, what is a Windows command? Anyone know it? Windows, how do you copy it in the terminal, in the command line? Nobody tried that?
I believe it's literally the word copy.
In Windows, if you do CMD, you open the terminal, that goes to the DOS system, right?
I believe it is copy. The command is just called copy.
Exactly. So it's a COPY, right? So this is the command, yeah. So I had a lot of experience with this command. In Windows, it's called that system called DOS, right? So what does it stand for? Anyway, that was the early operating system. Before, without Windows, everyone was using DOS and in the machine. So it used all this command. There's quite a lot of command, and I forgot most of those. But yeah, that's right, yeah. And then yeah, you can do the same thing. However, either this one won't work for this because this one only copies things locally within the same machine. And then we want to transfer the file from one machine to another one. So we need a more like powerful copy. Okay. So as some of you pointed out, Nick mentioned, it's called S copy. So secure copy. All right. So to do the secure copy, that means I want to transfer my file from one machine to another machine securely. All right. So this SCP depends on SSH. It uses some similar mechanism as SSH. As you can see later on, you will see the command actually looks very similar. All right, so I'm going to show you. All right, so right now I'm trying to copy this file to this machine. Right now this machine doesn't have it, so I go here. I will run this command. Okay, so it's called scp-i. This is the same thing because you want to copy things, you have to log in. All right, so always apply the password first. And then second, let's do what file you want to copy. I want to copy the CS480.jar file. Okay, you specify the target file, and then you specify your destination. Your destination is on a different server, so you have to do ec2-user, the username login, plus the host. So this part is very similar to the SSH. So you need to supply this one here. All right. So copy with this password. I want to copy this file to this machine using this username login. And after that, you also need to specify what's a path. So I do a colon, and I can specify slash, for example, users or all of those stuff. And to make it simple, I do this sign here. I don't know how to pronounce it. Okay. And then it's going to basically put a file to the default root folder in the home folder. Okay, that's how Linux works. But don't forget there is a path here. You have to specify where you want to put the file in. All right, so let's try it. All right, so I'm going to hit enter. As you can see, this one takes some time because it's trying to transfer the files through the internet. All right, so now it's done. Once this is finished, I'm going to go here, list file again. Now you can see the file. And if I look at the size, and this is exactly the same thing. That's how you can get the file over to a different machine. Yeah, Jonathan, no problem. So the SCP command, okay, let me show you. SCP command is similar to SSH, all right, because they use exactly the same mechanism. So you need to provide the same password like this, -i, and then give the PEM file. All right, and then you specify the file you want to copy, because that's just same as the regular copy. CS4800, sorry, 480 dot jar. Okay, this is the file you want to copy, and then you want to specify where you want to copy to. So I'm going to copy to a remote machine. That's why you need to provide this username, right? To log in, and then here is the host. But after that, you need to specify within the host what is the path you want to copy, right? Because this machine there, they have a lot of folders. Which folder you want to put in, right? So for example, I can try to put them into there a temp folder, yeah, temp folder, right? So I can do /temp. All right. So right now, if I try to go to temp, just this file, and if I try to run this command, all right, it will copy everything over. All right, so when that is done, go back here. I try to check out the temp file, and then you can find this file here. Okay, so this is a command. Okay, let me send it to you in chat. Yeah. Okay. So the SFTP, right? So yeah, I haven't used that one too much. It's probably, or isn't that maybe support some better things, right? So like if you cut or stop in the middle, you might be able to resume or something like that. There may be some of the similar features about that transfer protocol that you can use. For Windows, okay, I know there is something called a WinSCP. All right, so that is the equivalent. You might be able to find now here. Okay, so it's called WinSCP. All right, so it's a different tool, but graphical. All right, I think this is the one you need to use. All right, so any other questions about this command? That's how we can get the file to the remote server. So I'm gonna go back to my root folder right here. Okay, this is the file. And with this, the rest will be easy. Okay, I need to do java -jar cs48.jar. I run it, and it tells me Java command was not found. All right, obviously, this machine doesn't have Java installed. All right, so that is very common. Then you might run your Node.js, you find out the server doesn't have Node.js, but that's fine. Let's just install Java right here. Okay, so install things in Linux depends on what kind of version the Linux is. They may use different command, they may use different procedure, but most of these things you can easily find it online and by Googling. So there's really nothing secret and nothing like, don't feel this is anything advanced. Okay, you don't need to dig into exactly how the whole packaging and software installation system works. Just Google and try which one works. All right, this is really not the essential part about your software. So I'm gonna go here. I will say that Amazon Linux install JDK. All right. All right, so I will try to use, just pick any of those, see if that makes sense. All right. By the way, what is this query tool? It doesn't look like a Java. It's maybe their own like Java thing. Interesting. What is this? Very curious. Oh, okay. So it's basically their own version of JDK. All right. I don't know why they are creating all their own stuff. Okay. So what's the special thing about this one? So obviously they use this open JDK, the open source version, and then they put their own Java. All right. So yeah, maybe that works better for some of their services. Okay. So let's just do a standard one. I have no idea why they do this one. All right, let's try something else. How to install Java. All right, so yeah. So all you need to do is something like this. All right, pretty simple. Let's try it. So do the sudo command. This one, remember, they're installing the Open JDK. This is not a JDK officially supported by Oracle. You can also install the Oracle JDK. Okay, just Google it. But it doesn't really they're not a big difference, at least for the general purpose. All right, so this one they did a lot of work. Looks like it's good. And then this is to the Java 11. This is to Java 8. Let's try it. So Java. Yep. So now it's Java ready. Java dash version. It is 11. All right. So pretty new version. That's it. So very simple, right? So one command, and then you can install it. So this is the cool part about the command line. A lot of the things that think about if you go install this in Windows, in Mac, you download the file, double click and run everything, click on next, and then here is just one command. That's it. All right. So pretty straightforward. Once this is done, let's go back to this file here, java-jar CS480, and run it. Now everything works. All right. So as you can see, this thing here is running in the same way as we run in the locally, but it is happening in that remote machine. All right. So this is such a good example to show you what exactly deployment is, right? So deployment that you move your software, executable software to the target machine. Also make sure your target machine has the right environment. Now, obviously, this example we're showing you is probably the simplest way to do the deployment. Install one software, copy one jar file. But in reality, you probably need to install a lot of other things, and then you will need to copy more software to package together, right? But the idea is the same. All right, so since this one is up and running, let's try it. All right, so I go back to the server, find out that machine. This is our host name, okay? Anytime you try to find out the address, either try the IP address or the domain name, and we can try both. I'm gonna start with domain name first. All right, I go here, and then I will say colon 8080 because that's the port we're running. And I hit enter. And in general, it should open some kind of a message page, and then we do /home.js. But right now, it seems to be still running, loading. It's very slow. As you can see, it says connecting. All right. So at this point, okay, what if you are testing things with AWS? Okay, if you're seeing things that like this or trying to load it but it's not responding, you might think the internet is slow, or maybe the CPU is not fast enough, or maybe your program not efficient. Okay, but I can tell you very rarely it's the case because um, all these AWS services, the data centers, they got really good bandwidth. All right, so their internet speed is super fast, and it shouldn't be this long. If you wait for 3 or 4 seconds and nothing happened, then normally means something is wrong here. Right? This is the very typical issue you will face as you do the deployment. And if you see this one, no responding, no errors, it just keep trying, that normally means that you stuck on that request. The request is holding there like this, eventually, so it's timeout. The reason the timeout is because the port, okay, you're accessing might not be opened. That's normally the cause. All right, to understand a little bit more, we need to go back to the server. All right, so I want you to go scroll down, open this server, then you can find something called the security. All right, so everyone knows the server security is very important, but exactly what they're doing here for the security, this main part you're doing for here is the port. You can specify some inbound rules. You can specify something called outbound rules. All right. Inbound rules, that means that you want to control what kind of traffic can coming in to your server. And the outbound rules, you can control what kind of information you can send from the server. And then most of those are specified by the port number and also by the protocol. All right. So for the port number, I think we briefly explained that. Can anyone tell me why do we need different port number? How does the port number works? Exactly, Marcus. Yeah, so as Marcus mentioned, The reason we have a port number is that in the same machine, right? So you can have multiple programs running at the same time. Like in my case, I have my Chrome running. I got some of the messaging app running. I got my what else? Zoom meeting running. So they're all talking to the internet. So every second, I got so many requests and response coming in and out from my computer. How can I differentiate which request is for what application? We use a port number. So maybe Zoom is running on a certain number, and Chrome is running on another number, and then another one running another number. So we'll use that one to differentiate. Same thing here. So we're running our application in a port number 8080. However, you see this inbound rules here. Right now, we only open port 22. Does anyone know which program use 22? Yes, SSH, the one we use to do the copy, to do login, that one depends on 22. So that's why every EC2, they default give you the 22, because if you don't have this one, you can't do anything with it, right? Everything is closed. Now, what you need to do now is to add more rules to enable some of the port to be open. So what you need to do here is to go, let's see how do we editing. So you probably need to go click on this one called security groups. All right, and then you click on add inbound rules. And then I'm gonna add one more rule. I'll call this one just custom TCP. And then the port number is 8080. All right. And then you also specify the source. And then this is a pretty advanced in EC2. You can specify what kind of traffic you want to accept. So in this case, I'm going to do anywhere because this is the public service. I want everyone to be able to receive it, to be able to visit it. But if you want to control, I only allow certain people, certain range IP come visit it. You can also specify that one. All right, so I will do anywhere. And with that, I'm going to save the rule. All right, so with this rule saved, so I got to open the 8080 port. Let's go back to try it again. This time I go to the same URL, same port number, I hit enter. As you can see, this one works. It's super fast, you don't really need to wait. So we go /home-ags.html, and you got the same UI here. All right, you guys also can try this out. I'm gonna send a link right here. And then this is already publicly available through cloud with this URL, and everything works the same. All right, so, but then the program here is running, just I'm showing here. This is the Java application. All right, so it's still running. All right, so the one I was just showing you was, if you got stuck somewhere there, it's probably because of the port number. All right, depending on which port you're using. Node.js, it may use 3000, you just need to open those. Obviously, you can also open all the ports, but that's not very safe. All right, so this is how it works. And then if one point you stop the server, Control C, the server is stopped, and then you go back here, I refresh it, and nothing happened because you don't have a program running in the port, so you can't reach that. All right, so one more time, java-jar CS480. And that's how you run it. All right, so the server start, refresh, and now it's up and running. And then you can use both DNS and also the IP address. So we'll talk a little bit more about the differences to access your server. Either way should work. So if you go here, where is our, yeah, right here. So this IP address should also work. All right, so this is the same thing, same server, it's just a different way to find out where the server is. All right, so by doing this, you got everything deployed. All right. Yeah, so Nick, we'll talk about that one. Okay, so how do you change the domain name, redirect the domain name to this one here? All right, so any questions so far? So this week and this weekend, you guys need to deploy your application to your cloud. It doesn't matter how much functionality you have. even it's a very simple one page not working, that's okay. Uh, I want you to start to kind of deploy this one as early as you can. All right. So um, very important. Okay. At the end, when we look at a project, so you guys never need to ask me, oh, is our project enough? Like I feel like I didn't do too many features. This project seems to be very, very simple, and we didn't have time, running out of time. We didn't implement all the features. That's all fine with me. Okay, you don't need to ask me. No matter how simple your application is, we are not going to criticize or judge you on the features because there's no way to give you a standard. I can't say, okay, you have to write 10,000 lines of code or you have to do 10 features, right? It doesn't really matter. Eventually, whether you solve the problem matters. However, as normal, as usual, if you know me from the mobile application class, we'll be really, really picky on whether you deploy this thing or not. Okay, so I want to make sure that you got this thing up and running in the cloud with domain name, looks professional. Because if you have that one, you will feel more confident when you put things on the resume. But in terms of how many lines you wrote and for the feature, that's okay. That's something I'll leave you yourself to leave it to yourself to figure out. Okay, but on our side, want to make sure the deployment, because these are the things that you can use to present it. All right, so definitely pay a lot of attention to it. So what if we? Oh yeah, yeah. My good question. Okay, we'll talk about how you redeploy it, how there's a better way to do the updates. Okay, so we'll show you some of the really professional approach to do that. Exactly. For right now, you can stop the code, re-upload it, rerun it. That's it. All right. So exactly. So right. So we'll talk about this one briefly right now. Okay. So now let's bring me to the next topic. Very practical topic about the software operations. All right, so as you can see, this part here, I'm showing like all the command Linux. All right, I'm not sure how many of you like this kind of topic, how many of you don't like it. Always has nothing to do with it. Algorithm, with writing code, with the regular CS. Okay, some of you might like it because it sounds like very practical, right? But some of you would feel that this is really not CS. So this is called software operations. All right. So you need to differentiate. There are two type of work here in the software teams, software companies. Most of us were talking about development, writing code, building software, writing tests, everything. But the operation is uh, uh, another part. So operation normally just means that any of this non-development work, for example, you need to deploy it, you need to maintain some of the database, you need to set up some of the security rules, just like I showed you, security group. Anything about the system, not directly related to coding the software, it belongs to operations. And both development operation are important. Obviously, operation is kind of a the role that supports everything. If you just write a code and you don't manage it in the professional environment, then it's useless. And the example I'm showing today is obviously really really simple and naive, but in reality, uh, big companies they're managing thousands of servers. Can anyone make a guess on how many servers Amazon is using for their homepage 10 years ago? I don't know the right now data, but I know the data from 10 years ago when I was in a company. So Amazon.com, do you know how many servers are used to support that website? 2010, right? Not 2020. Not too many, Johnson. That's too many. So they got 5,000 servers. Okay, large servers. If you go to EC2, there is a large server, and they use that one. And they got 5,000 servers always up and running for Amazon.com 10 years ago. And right now, it had to be much more than that. All right, but managing 5,000 servers, that's not like a simple development work. Okay, you got to have a team to do the operation and really watch that carefully. So operation definitely important. But if you ask me which one is more technical, if you ask me which one makes more money, well, obviously the first one. That's why these days that if you see roles like DBA, database administrators, network administrators, system administrators, they're not getting well paid as the developers. Okay, just because this part here is more creative. Obviously it's more important from the product point of view. But also another important reason, guys, is there's this thing called the DevOps. Okay, a very popular term inside the company right now. So the trend right now is that as a developer, you should also be able to handle operations. So this DevOps is a very popular concept in most of the company, big companies, small companies. Then the most of the teams do not want to have a dedicated DBA or network engineer there to just support it. It's not really efficient because you're not going to have all these issues every single day. You only probably do this deployment once every cycle, and you if everything works, it's fine. Then you don't need a operator there. So not very efficient. That's why we tend to have the developers to take care of operations. And then for developer to take care of this one, it's just a piece of cake. Nothing really difficult at all, right? So you just need to be familiar with all this practice. The DevOps is a really popular trend right now in the companies. That's why there will be fewer and fewer roles just for operations. So I know every class, I know there are certain students who are really into Linux or really into like all the command and everything. As a hobby, I think it's good. From a career wise, I would recommend you should still train yourself as a developer. That's where you can do much more contribution and makes more money just because this role is declining really dramatically. You can tell why it's declining. The main reason is because of cloud computing. Because today you see, I showed you from the moment you create a server to the moment you deploy the Java. I was showing you the step by step. If I were doing something by my own, I do everything within 2 minutes and then done. And also I can guarantee my deployed version is super secure. It's much more secure than you spend months to set up something at home. Because of cloud computing, because of all the service and tools, the operations become so easy to do, and you don't need to worry too much. It's all taken care of by cloud computing providers. It's all secure. They have best practice. It's from the configurations that Amazon's been using. So what do you need to worry about? So because all of this, the operations is easier. That's why developer would just handle it, and that's why we have this concept called DevOps. All right. So that's something I want to, the message I want to give you. If you're really thinking about, going specific to operations, probably rethink about that decision. However, I still admit that there are certain fields that we need, obviously, we need dedicated operations. Now, if you're working in Amazon data center, obviously, you need to be really good at all this operation stuff. Or another role like DBA, it won't be gone for some of the relational database like MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server, those ones, when they go to a certain degree, you will need certain people to manage them. Okay, it's a pretty complicated, and it takes some effort and experience to make it a very very efficient. But for NoSQL, like relation, no MongoDB, those will be much easier. All right. So anyway, so here, but we want to briefly talk about the operation. What you need to know, and then what's important, right? So that's why I don't want to spend too much time on this one because this is only a little tiny part of your job, and most of these are about Linux, right? It's because again, if you're not doing even web application or web services, there's really not much operation you need to do. If you build a mobile app, it's just nothing. You just code it, and then once at the end you build it, that's that. So that's why I don't want you to do a mobile application because it's really easy in terms of managing it, operating it. But the web service program, that's probably the most complicated type of software you ever can build that involves a lot of extra things. But most of those are about Linux. All right. So speaking of Linux, I haven't done a survey. I don't know how many of you are officially using it, right? So if you're using Windows, probably never done this. If you're using Mac, it's better because Mac is pretty much based on Linux. Some of the things are similar, but I again I assume that you're not really using a lot of this Linux command and tools very often. I do know some of you actually have Linux installed. That's good. So this part will be really easy for you. Definitely a good addition, like a skill for you that will help you to be able to work with the team very quickly in the beginning. All right, but it's really not difficult. Definitely start to look into this one. All right. And also, I don't know how many of you don't like Linux. All right. That was how I felt in the very beginning. I was a very big fan of Windows, okay, because I kind of experienced, I mentioned about DOS. All right. So I started using computer with DOS. At that time, there was Windows 3.1, Windows 3.2. That was a very popular version. So at that time, I don't know how many you know it. So Windows 3.1, Windows 3.2, it is a software application you run it inside the DOS. So for example, when you boot your computer, you go to the terminal in DOS first. Then if you want to run Windows, then you type something called WIN, enter, and then that's going to start Windows. So that's how that Windows works at that time. It is not a default bootable operating system. It is an application. It's for graphic UI. So I really like it because it actually goes from the command line to the graphical. It really make everything simpler. And eventually, from Windows 95, that's the first version that computers start to boot directly go to Windows. And then since then, that's basically what we're using. So when I go to company, hey, Amazon, I realized that everything is in Linux. And then when you try to deploy that and run everything, even when you code Java, I was coding in a Red Hat Linux in a graphical desktop, but it's so inconvenient. They use a lot of command line to editors such as VI. I don't know how many use VI before. I still hate it. I still haven't figured out how the whole change works, and I was very frustrated. Yeah, Vim is much better. Yeah, but at first I heard like VS is so professional. I still till today I don't see a point of using that. I think the IntelliJ can be super fast, much faster. So, but I know there are so many developers in the company they still use VS and VM to do everything. I think that's totally unnecessary. So I was a little bit frustrated. I thought, well, we have all this graphical UI, and we know like user experience is important, UI is important. Why do we still stuck with all this Linux stuff? I know it sounds like professional, it sounds like not for the regular end user, but what's the point? Our point is to get software done. Why do we have to deal with this one? I spent really a lot of time on getting familiar with all of this because I had pretty much zero experience on Linux. It's not hard, but there's just so many things that you need to learn and gain the experience. Sooner or later, I started to realize, and now if you ask me the same question, I would definitely highly recommend you to start looking into a little bit about Linux because for servers, for web applications, obviously this is the best choice. All right, just because think about these reasons. All right, so it's much more stable, it's much more secure, um, then a lot of people misunderstood this one. We compare Windows and Linux, and then we say that Linux is more stable, Linux is more secure, right? So this has been something like people been using to criticize Microsoft all the time. And but you really see think about the root behind it. The reason Linux and is more stable and secure is just because Linux is simpler. It actually doesn't mean that the engineers in Microsoft wasn't smart or they wrote bad code. Just because in Windows, they had to do so many more things, graphical UIs, 3D, all this rendering, all those things. But Linux is just such a simple thing there, command line. Because of the simplicity, it is easier to make it more secure. It is easier to make it more stable. So that's a root cause. So my point is there's no right or wrong, better or worse. Both are good. It just when it comes to running things, Linux is simple. That's why let's stick with that one. That's why most of the servers are running in Linux today, except the .NET framework. All right, so this is something I figured out eventually. And of course, there are certain things that Linux does really efficiently, just like a command I showed you. If you do SSH, if you do SCP, using one command to do it, but for Windows, you got to open it, click, and then do a lot of configuration to do it. So from that point of view, it's more quicker, as Nick mentioned. Of course, you need to know those commands first, right? So these are some of the background I want you to know. So I want you to be very open-minded, whether you like Linux or you like Windows or you like Mac. You should realize that this system all good, uh, depending on what you're trying to do. all right, and then, but for your job as a developer, you definitely need to know a little bit about Linux, all right. So no need to read a book. You don't need to take too much like tutorials. I think you just need to Google the things you need to do and then try the command. That's it. All right. Because I feel that if you got a time, you'd rather spend the time on learning some new technique, like development skills, rather than spend the time to read some book on Linux. I really don't see a need of doing that, because you only need to do very limited things about operations. So that's the things I want to show you. So this lecture here, I create all the slides by myself. I simply just summarize the things I do frequently, once a game, whenever I run a web application. And if you ask me 1 to 10, my like expertise on Linux, I would say like probably 1. All right, I really don't know anything else, but I know this command really well that allows me to do all the operation things without any issues. Whether it's in the big companies, server companies, or some kind of random projects, it's really enough. All right, so I want to highlight this one so that when you are managing your web services, then you can be at the same level. All right, the first one I already mentioned is SSH. I kind of already explained. This is the most important one. You need to know um, uh, using the command passwords and the key permissions, and also the username and the host. All right, I'm not going to repeat this one. Together with SSH, you also need to know how to copy file remotely. That's the SCP command. All right, so secure copy, same kind of format. So all of this, you don't have to need to get my slide. Just Google, see how to do it, and then you will find the answer very easily. All right. So now the next one, let's talk briefly about how do you run applications in the Linux. All right. So go back to my terminal. Let me go back here. So I already showed you this is how you run it. I start my program. Okay, I found out this code here. I just type the command java-jar CS480. That's it. Right, nothing special. Run the command with this um, you know JD sorry Java virtual machine, and then this is the parameter, and then this is the actual jar file, right? So I hit enter, and then it started my progress. All right. So that's how you run it, just using the command line. It looks very straightforward, but there are a little bit more things than just running this one. Ideally, this is not the best way approach to run it. So a couple of things. Number one, all right. So this one right now, the way we run it, okay, it is called running this in the foreground. So basically, as you can see, my cursor stop here. And then because I'm running this program, and this program never stops because it's a server program. That's why while your cursor is here, you cannot really do anything else. Okay, I can't run another command. I can't do something else. Even though the operating system, Linux, allows you to do multitasking in parallel. All right, so that's not good. Unless I have to stop my program, I Control C, and then I can do something else. But this time, your program is already, killed, and you don't have the service up anymore. So the first thing we want to ask you or want you to know is how can you run things in parallel? That's what we do now, right? I'm running Zoom in parallel. Well, I won't call it in background, but I have Zoom, Chrome, a messaging app, everything like all together in the same place. Some of those are in the background, some of those are in the foreground. So that's what you want to have. But you don't want to stuck with one application only, then nothing else you can do. Right? So how do we run things in background? Does anyone know? Right? Yeah, very good. Okay, so we got some of the good Linux experts. All you need to do is just put an and character here at the end. All right, so just do this one here. And as you can see, once you do it, and then it will just go back to the terminal. Even though this console output still kind of bothers you, but that's okay. That's just how they go to the screen. And then, but you can do all the things as usual. And at this time, if you go here to refresh, as you can see, the service is still up and running. Okay, I can just add some ID, and it still works. All right. So, but now the program is in the background. All right, so that's the first thing you need to know. Really simple. All right, so add this and at the end. How do you run things at the background? You don't have to memorize this. If you need it, when you need it, just Google it. All right. So another thing I need to know is how do we keep the logs? So this is the kind of part of the issue that we were running right now. So this one here, as you can see, when you run it, all this output, they go to the console, go to the default console. In Eclipse, it will actually print out right here. In here, it will just go to the screen, right? It's not good because first of all, it's a mess up your terminal. Secondly, if they just show up here, and then if you come back later, then you kind of lose all these things, right? These are not really persistent. The ideal way of doing this is to keep all the logs into a file. So in that case, you don't have to worry about this one being lost, and also it will not mess up your screen. So my next question is, when you run this application like this, how do you track your logs and put your log into a file? This one can be done in different ways, but how can you do that from command line? So I'm going to queue the process first. Okay, I'll talk about how we queue the process later. But now this thing is not running. This is not running. But my question is, how do you redirect all the output to a file when you're running it? All right, yeah, Nick told me the answer. So you use a pipe, and in Linux you have this concept called a pipe. You can direct all this output to some other place. It could be a file, it could be some other terminal. So I'm going to put this one into something called a CS4800.log file. I create this file here. So that means everything you output from this part will be direct and then goes to here, and it will be saved. All right, and then if I go to this command again, it will also run in the background. So if I hit enter, all right, so now you don't see anything, but the server is running, and then you go here. All right, so server is up and running. If you want to find the logs, check out the file, it's right here. All right, so you can just look at the file. And here we go. So everything has been nicely saved and persisted so that you can, to kind of check it whenever you need. And then it's not going to interact with your run application. As you can see, these are also some of the simple things that you need to know when you run the server application. When you run a regular Java program, you never need to deal with this. But when it comes to server, these are all the things you must take care of. Okay, otherwise you lose a log and everything. You can't really go back to debug all of this. All right. There's one more thing, and some of you did mention that. Yeah, so Jonathan asked if this runs in the background, it runs even you close the terminal. So it's a great question. So right here, right? So it's in the background, it's running. As you can see, it's running right here. So Jonathan's question was, what if I close the window? So I exit IT. So now I'm going back from remote to my local. This is my local computer. Is this one still running? Does anyone know the answer or some of the best practice about this? Yes, looks like it is, but I think eventually it will be terminated. I think there's some kind of unpredictable timing, but eventually it will be stopped. All right, so I don't know the theory. Don't ask me. I have no idea how the Linux handle this one, but sooner or later you will see this one stopped. I don't know when. All right, and maybe also depends on some kind of application. So this is not good. All right, so that's the third thing we want to talk to you here. How can we make sure that even you leave your terminal, even it's in the background, looks like the background is nice, but once you leave the terminal, and somehow Linux feel that this user is gone, and then it will eventually, just like garbage collection, that's my explanation, okay? We'll just kill some of the process you trigger. So we don't want that happen. How? Right now, the server is still running, okay? So let me just queue it first. All right, and this one is, oops. All right, so this one is not running. So let me go back, okay, java-jar CS4800. This one here, go to the log file and background. I said This is a pretty decent command to run, but it's not enough because it doesn't prevent it from being terminated after you exit your terminal. So you need one extra command. Does anyone know the answer? What do we do to keep this process running stably, even you leave your terminal? All right, Nick, you know everything. That's good. All right, so this one is called no hook. All right. Again, I don't know much about this command. I just know the purpose. If you run things with no hook, well, that's just basically a tool that helps you to keep this thing live all the time, even if you exit your terminal. All right, if you want to look more about the command, just Google it, and there are a bunch of parameters, but I rarely use any of the parameters. Just do something like this. All right, we'll hit enter. So this is the ultimate way to run the application. All right, I won't say this is, I can't judge whether it's the perfect way or most mature, most stable way. I don't know. But I can tell you that in Amazon, some of our servers that has dealing with millions of users, we're doing something like this. All right, so this is the ultimate command you should keep in mind, okay, when you're running things. Again, this one applies for Java. I assume for some other services, probably all similar. Okay, of course, there are certain framework maybe have their own best practice and tools that you can follow and use, and that might be better. Okay, but ideally, you need to keep in mind when you're running this process, how can you make sure it's running in the background, with all the logs persistent, and also the process itself will not be affected by you, exit to the terminal. So let me see some of the questions. So deployment isn't enough. Yes, Jimmy. When you are running on a server, you must use no hook. Okay, this is required. If you don't do that, you can try it. Your server will be stopped sometime. Okay, I don't know how long, but it will be stopped once you quit your terminal. Yeah, it's not just a file. It just means that when you exit the terminal, SSH terminal, then somehow there's some signals that's going to maybe kill that server anytime soon. Yeah. All right. So how do you stop the server? That's the next thing we're going to talk about, right? How do we manage the process? All right. So in Linux, they use this command line to do everything. Now in our regular system, like in Mac and everything, so I want to close this one. I go to the window, I click on this close button to close it. This is the nicest, easiest way to close. Unfortunately, you don't have that one in your Linux. All right, so Linux uses this kind of a closing command. There are different ways to do it. I'm just going to show you a couple ones I use very often. So to close some application, you need a way to specify which one you want to close. Close the command is very simple, something called a queue. That's a command, but when you queue it, you need to know the process you want to queue. Everything we're running in operating cycle is a process. So this should be something you already learned in the OS operating system. So inside process, you can have multiple threads, right? But the threads belong to the process, belong to the application. So when we're queue some application, we're mainly queue the process. You don't queue the thread. All right, so the thread is managed by the process, managed by the programs. So you need to know the information about the process. All right, so there are different ways to know the information about process. One command I use is something called a PS. All right, so this is the one to use to list all the process. I forgot what that is. So any of this command, if you want to know, how do we do? Yeah. So any of this command, you want to know the ultimate like documentation, do something called man, and then PS. That's going to tell you all the everything about the command. If you read this one, take your time, okay? And it's going to be hundreds of parameters, and I think after reading this one, it still doesn't tell you much. That's why it's better just simply Google, oh, I want to do this, what's a command? And then they will tell you what's a command. So I normally use some command called ps-efl. All right. Again, don't ask me what these parameters are. You can find it out, okay? But I really don't care because this is some Amazon principal engineer told me what to do, and it filters certain type of process for me. That's just something I'm been using all the time. All right. So ps-eflf or whatever. I don't think the order matters. You can look into more about each parameter, what does it mean. But I just want to show you there are ways to show you the process. You can just Google and figure out the way that works for you. That's it. And you can see this one showed everything running in the operating system. And then we're particularly caring about that Java application we're running. As you can see, it's actually right here. All right. As you can see right here, this is the command. Obviously, this is the one we're running for our application. But that's too many, right? So sometimes if you want to easily identify where that server is, okay, so you do this one, okay, PS to show all of those, and I will do this, again, this kind of pipe operator. I will do this command called grep. Grep means I want to analyze the tags and then just to filter out certain tags. So I want to grab all the things about Java. All right, so if you do this one here, all right, so now it shows you only the process that has the Java in the keyword. And obviously this is the one, this is not, this is some kind of random thing. I think it's coming from the grep command. This is not the actual application. So here is that process. In this process, the first two very important. This is the process ID. That's the one you're going to use. I forgot what this one is. Okay, you can look into it. But then this first number is the process ID that represent this process. This is very similar to in Windows, the text manager or your Mac. You also have this kind of thing, right? You want to force close something, you just open this task manager and then close that. Here is the same thing, just doing that from the command line. You have to find out which process it is, and then know this ID. This ID is 12263, right? So then you can queue it. To queue it, you do a command called queue 12263. That's it. But there are two things you normally do. Queue -9. This parameter means that you want to shut it down immediately. That's normally what you want. Otherwise, maybe it has to wait a little bit if the process is doing something else. But then -9 means like queue it right now. Okay, so that's something you normally use. And another thing is you need to add a sudo, because this one, sudo means that you run this one as admin. Just like in Windows, you right click, run the application as admin. Sudo means the same thing. So because this one deals with very like a sensitive operation, and they want to make sure you have the permission. So when you do sudo, they will check if you have a permission. If you don't have a permission, they will ask you to prompt to type the password. Okay, so I'm going to run this one here. Again, the command is sudo q -9 process ID. I hit enter, and that kills everything. So now I do ps this again, and then you don't see that anymore. And I go back here, I refresh the page, it's gone. All right, so that's how you list the process. How do you queue it? I use a better command, not a better, but a simpler command. Sometimes it works. I would just do sudo queue all, everything about Java. So that's going to kill everything about Java. So that's why if this is the only one you're doing, then you can do that. I think this one is just finding the keyword. All right. This one sometimes works, sometimes not. If you're not sure what the process looks like, this one won't work. But also this one kills everything. So just use that with cautious. Okay. But this is the standard way to do it. So let's try one more time to summarize. Okay. No hope Java -jar CS480. All right, go to the log file running in the background. Now the service up and running. If you want to see if it's up and running, PS is right here. As you can see, this time it has a slightly different process ID. And then to queue it, sudo q -9 12365, and then this service is gone. All right. if you know this one, you will know how do you update your application, right? So all you need to do is queue it, recopy it, rerun it, then a new version is set it up. All right, so I'm gonna stop here today, guys. This is some of the very basic things about how you manage your process. Okay, show running, process terminated. We'll also talk about some of the port direction, some other stuff. But these are so far the most important things. You know, how to log in, copy, run it, and queue and then rerun it, and keeping all the logs clean, persisted, and then make sure your process running stably. All right. So everyone should try to act this one as quick as you can and try to put that into your server. Okay. Obviously, it's a lot of fun. Any kind of issues, try to, you have just try to Google it and you will find out this answers very easily. Oh no, the jar file name can be anything. I think it's configured in a Maven file. If you use the Maven, the jar file name is configured by Maven. I don't think it matters. I think if you just change the file name, it shouldn't be an issue.